It's Division 2. Letters of interest for that position is due by February 12th at 4 p.m. And Division 2 is from about Neal Road to the west side, kind of Valley View out in that area. If you need a map, you can find the map on our website. If you're living on the lot temporarily, we need you to sign up so that we know to schedule you for your service lateral replacement, pidwater.com/recovery. We also are going to hold some classes, water service basic information sessions for contractors and do-it-yourselfers, February through April, 1-hour education sessions held at the PID boardroom. There will be Thursday, February 27th, March 26th, and April 30th, all at 10 a.m. And you can find those dates on our website also. We also received a grant from the Butte Strong Foundation for 5-gallon water jugs that you can have for no cost and that you can use to fill up at our filling stations. So as a lot of water delivery stops, we thought of an alternative to be able to get water to you, the individuals that still need water. And so we felt like we could go out and get these bottled water jugs. And so those will be available coming in March. And if nothing else, even if you don't need to use them for a long period of time, they're great for an emergency storage situation in case we needed to get some more bottled water before that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Lundquist. He's going to give you a quick update on the standing home testing.
So I'd like to give a brief update about the testing of standing structures. And as a little reminder of the process that we go through for testing each standing structure is we want to test the water main and the street out in front of the standing structure. We want to test the service lateral, which is what connects the main to the water meter. And when we say standing structures, it's both residential and businesses around town. So the way we accomplish that is what we need to do is stagnate or still the water within that service lateral for at least 72 hours. And so if the structure is occupied, what we'll do is we'll bring a temporary source of water from a nearby water meter or hydrant, hook it up, so who's ever using that structure will have water during this entire stagnation period. We do that using a set of hoses. You might have seen them around town, the blue fire hoses. We also put up a sign that says water testing in progress with the PID phone number. After we've stagnated the water, somebody comes by and takes a sample of the water both in the service lateral and in the main. Then we pick up our hoses and restore the water service. That sample goes to an accredited lab where they'll do thorough testing on it, and we get the results back, usually within about a week. And then they'll go through quality control process and through a committee to make sure that we've followed all our procedures and everything is correct. And at the end of that, we know for certain the condition of that service lateral in the main. And if it's in compliance, PID can issue a letter rescinding the water quality advisory. In the rare instance we find that the pipe is damaged, fire-induced damage, and is contaminated, it'll be scheduled to be replaced with brand new pipe. Where we are in this process is we know there's about 1,550 standing structures within the service area, both residential and commercial. We're just passing through, probably by tomorrow, as we've prepared the 1,400th site, and testing is usually a few days behind that. So by the end of this week, we will have sampled about 1,400 of those 1,550, and we are on track by the middle to the end of March to have all of standing structures gone through this entire process, which means we know with absolute certainty that the pipes are in compliance and we're delivering potable water to the meter, or there was a problem and we need to replace that pipe. So anybody in a standing structure by the end of March will have that certainty.
Good evening. I'm Colleen Boak with Waterworks Engineers, and I'm going to give you a brief update on the replacement of the service laterals, as Michael mentioned, for a couple of different circumstances. Service laterals are currently being replaced for standing structures, as you mentioned, where contamination from the fire has been detected through testing. Also for destroyed lots where there are rebuilds currently in progress. And we'll be working temporary housing locations where folks are living on their lots in trailers or other temporary housing as well in the coming weeks in the next month or so. So that work to replace service laterals is being done by both contractor services as well as PID staff. We're taking that as a joint effort and working side by side to get those taken care of as quickly as possible. To date, 188 locations have received rescinding letters of the water quality advisory as a result of the service lateral being replaced. So that's a combination of standing structures and also burned locations where we've been able to send a letter saying that the water is safe to drink at that location. We've replaced the contaminated service lateral. So what does it take to receive a letter of potability as a result of a service lateral replacement? It goes through a similar stepped process as the testing. We identify an address to be added to the priority list, and that address is identified either by information from the town of Paradise related to a building permit or by the results of testing at a standing structure telling us that there is fire-related damage at that location. So those addresses are identified to us and we place them on our priority list for replacement. At that stage, we go out in conjunction with PID staff and locate that lateral. And that's a fairly complex process to go out and mark the location where that lateral is going to be installed, but most particularly to find the main and the lateral under the ground. That can be fairly challenging. It's an older system with different types of materials and different levels of information available for different areas of town. So we go out and conduct underground service alerts and mark the roadway for where we think that connection is, and go and pothole, meaning excavating in the street to try and find what we're looking for, which is that connection of the service lateral to the main. And we never know until we open that up what the actual condition is, what the for sure pipe material is and the sizes and the valving condition of that location. So we're going and potholing these locations to determine what actually needs to take place in terms of installation in order to get that service lateral replaced. Once we replace the lateral, according to the PID's new standard for a service lateral, we're able to backfill. And at that stage, PID is able to go back out and reestablish water service at that location. Once that's complete, that address goes before our Water Quality Advisory Committee for a final review to make sure that everything is squared away, that main is clear, that the service lateral was correctly replaced, that water service has been reestablished. And at that point, we're able to issue a letter for clearing the water quality advisory at that location. So some of the challenges, as I mentioned, that we've been working through as we've gotten going, we brought a contractor on board in mid-November to assist with PID's replacement of these laterals. It's a big effort. There's quite a few that need replacement and quite a few people's rebuilds and temporary housing that we are working to support. So in order to address that as quickly as possible, we brought contractor services on board to boost the amount of folks that we could have working on this project. And in getting going with that project, we've had to learn and work through a number of challenges that include a lot of what I mentioned with the potholing and understanding what is actually under the ground that we have to connect to properly and install per the new standard. Obviously, we are also working to retrofit anything that we can, reuse the materials where appropriate, and fit new infrastructure in with the current conditions. So that takes some field engineering on occasion and some judgment in the field. Oftentimes when we uncover a section of main, we may find a leak, or we may find another issue in that area where we have it open already and it makes sense to make a repair. So sometimes that occurs and we need to work with PID to have them respond to that issue and take care of that while we have the street open, so that we're not coming back to the same location more times than we need to. And then also, there are, as I'm sure you know, there are a number of other operations taking place in town, tree work and other utilities that are being installed. So we are working to work around those other operations safely and make sure that our crews are not working underneath, for example, tree work or other things taking place. We need to coordinate with PG&E and other utilities to make sure we have the proper offsets from their utilities going in as well. So that's a constant effort as well. And then lastly, also, we're working through the winter season. So we do have to work around the winter weather. You will see the crews out there working in the rain if they at all can, in order to continue progress on the project. But if the weather conditions don't allow for proper installation of the plumbing or the backfill, we can't continue work on those particular days. So we're doing everything we can to continue to work around those conditions. And then lastly, we are shifting on a pretty constant basis as far as which addresses we're addressing in order to be able to support rebuilds as they come near to final. So we are doing everything we can to gather information both from the town's daily inspection reports and from PID customer service to understand what's going on with everyone's individual builds and where they are at, so that if we have folks that are nearing a final inspection, we do everything we can to pivot and address those so that they are not held up. As much as we can avoid that, we don't want to hold up somebody's certificate of occupancy for their lateral. That will happen on occasion that we're a couple of days behind, and we will do everything that we can to make an adjustment and get to that location as soon as possible. If the contractor is not able to, because we have several sites open that we need to close, we work with PID to see if their staff is available to address. So that's a constant feedback loop happening, like I mentioned, from daily reports from the town of Paradise, as well as a constant communication with our PID customer service to make sure if a resident calls in with a concern related to that we know about it almost immediately and we can do something about it. So the contractor on board, that project is scoped to replace 650 service laterals by May of this year. And it's intended to be a short-term workforce augmentation, as I mentioned, in order to help PID staff ramp up and be able to address these laterals as quickly as possible. Ultimately, over the long term, PID staff will be addressing the majority of replacements throughout the town over time. And so far, under that contract, 65 laterals have been replaced as of today, with another 40 in some level of progress. So either they've been located or potholed or opened up somewhere along that progression. And so we were able to double our production rate from the first month to the second, and so we're able to pick up our pace and learn a lot from what we've seen and start to understand some of the challenges that we encounter and how to deal with them quickly. And so we expect to continue to improve that process and pick up that rate as we move into the next month. So, Kevin, are there any other topics you wanted to address? Okay.
Thank you, Colleen. So just a few other little topics I'm going to address, and then we'll open up to question and answer, and hopefully answer everybody's question that is here. Meter replacement project. So right now there is no meters, or there is meters in the ground, but we're not out there reading them. Right now what we're doing is a damage assessment of the meters. So our first goal of the recovery project was the contamination. We feel like we have a pretty good understanding of it. We're working through it. And then the second was to make sure that the rebuild was moving forward too. And so the service line replacement was our second goal, to make sure that we were out in front of that, to make sure that people that had standing structures or new builds were not going to be held up. Our third goal is the meter replacement project. And so what we had to do is go out and pull meters from the out in the field, bring them in, and then assess them. We made the assumption that based on our percentages that we're showing 53% of burnt lots are showing some type of contamination in there due to the fire. So we know 53% of the meters are damaged. We still had to go through the process of looking at the other meters themselves to see how many are damaged. And what we're finding is that about 20% have some sort of physical damage, and about 53%, which is kind of crazy how they go together, have some internal damage. And so based on that, we are asking FEMA and our insurance to replace every meter in the district. So when we go through and replace the meters, after we get approval for that, we're going to replace them with something more hardened. It's a hardened meter. So a brass meter with a concrete box, so that if God forbid, a fire ever came back through the town, that there would be a harder system there so that there wouldn't have this damage associated with the fire. So that's where we're at with that, and we're hoping that we're going to start that implementation in the summer. So we should start seeing meters going in the summer, and then we'll start charging again for water use at that time. The other question that we've had a lot is about backflow, the backflow assembly. So I think there was a little bit of confusion when the backflow assembly policy was written, and there's a difference. So for all new construction or burnt lot, there is a requirement for a backflow. That is to protect the system from contamination being put back into the system by sucking it back in. For any new structure, there's a requirement for a backflow because there's a fire sprinkler requirement and there's other hazards out there that are present now with the new construction requirements. For a standing structure, if you didn't need a backflow before the fire and nothing changed between then and now, there is actually no requirement for a backflow currently. If you have something that you had something burnt on your lot, like a garage, but your house is still standing, there is a requirement for a backflow because there's a hazard on that lot. If you brought in a portable tank on your property for drinking, because there's a pump system there, there's a requirement for a backflow. But if nothing changed at this point in time, there is no requirement for a backflow. So I wanted to kind of clear that up for everybody. Let me get my phone up here. B-res. So we had the B-res that was damaged during the fire. We actually had plans to replace it before the fire, but because it got damaged during the fire, it kind of opened up a new funding opportunity for us, which was FEMA funding. So instead of putting the B-res back to where it was, we're asking for FEMA to pay for upgrades to that B-res. And so we've been going through negotiation with FEMA and our insurance to get additional funding in so that we can put 2 steel tanks in that site. We still haven't come to a conclusion on the size of the tanks. What we would like to do was, our original thought was 2.3 million gallon tanks at that site, which would increase the storage from 3 million to 5.6. And that was due to fire protection. So that we were looking to increase fire protection in the town by increasing the storage. And the 2 tank option was for redundancy. So if you needed to bring 1 tank down, the other tank was still there. If FEMA is not going to pay for the additional storage, then our next option is to put 2 1.5 million gallon tanks there to bring it back to the original storage, but also to harden the system again with the steel tanks and have the 2 tank option for the redundancy. So right now that's where it is. We're hoping to come to a conclusion in the next month on that, and then start hopefully construction in the summer on that also. And then PID's future. So we have some financial issues obviously out there due to the fact that we lost 90% of our customer base. We did go to the state and ask for backfill funding, which we received. We received our first year of backfill funding in October, and then our second year will be in July 1st. We did agree, though, through that to go through what they call a consolidation feasibility study. And it sounds a lot scarier than it truly is. So this is what the state, this is the first time that they've actually done this type of study. It's not a forced consolidation study. It's what they call a holistic look at PID to see how the state can come in and help PID survive through this. And we are having a kickoff meeting here in the next week. And then after the kickoff meeting, they're actually going to do a lot of community meetings to get input from you guys on what you guys want from PID and how you see PID going forward. They're also going to look at the finances. They're going to look at our assets to see if there's an ability for us to leverage our assets like we've been talking about maybe with the Intertie project, which I know you've heard probably in the news. But also look outside of that to see if there's other opportunities for us to get revenue in so that we can be here through the rebuild. I'm very positive about it. I think it's going to be a good way for the state to really hear the voice of this community on how important PID is to them. So I really encourage everybody to go to those meetings, to give your guys' input to them so that they understand how important PID is to you, as as residents up here. So that's my updates on those specific items. And then we got a few questions online that I'm going to walk through and answer real quick, and then we're going to open it for question and answer period. So our first question, are there any plans to add local in-town storage such as tanks to assure more water will be immediately available in the system for better fighting large in-town fires like we mostly just survived? So I think I've answered that one, is that we are looking for that expansion of that B-Res. That will help us increase that storage there. We're also we're approved, well, we haven't been approved all the way through, but it appears that we're going to get a hazard mitigation grant to run a secondary pipeline from the treatment plant into town. So that'll give us redundancy on that side too, so that if our one pipe that is the sole source of water coming into town happen to be damaged or mudslide or an earthquake, that we'd have a secondary pipe coming into town, and that's going to help redundancy on that side also. Second question. What is the time frame for eventual replacement of meters throughout the district so usage can again be measured? Again, that's going to be in the summertime. Is there sufficient local storage to keep fire insurance rates down? You have to ask your insurance company on that one. But I believe that there is for normal occurrences. Obviously, this was unprecedented, and the way this fire reacted, no one expected. But I do feel like our water storage in town at this point is sufficient to fight normal fires. And as flows increase or need to be increased for new homes, we are looking at upsizing pipes in those streets. And then when we do go through and upsize those pipes, we are looking at adding hydrants on some of those streets to help for fire protection on some of those streets that maybe had lower flows or were put in so long ago that there was no hydrant available for that, for those addresses. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions here. We have a mic, so we have a mic runner, and so we'll go back there first, yeah. Just coming right behind you.
Hear me? Here we go. Two questions. First, where would we find out about the community meetings that the state is going to be doing?
Those will be on the website,
Okay.
on our website, and we'll make sure that we give press releases, and it'll be on Facebook. So they haven't been set yet, but as soon as they are set, we will push those out to everybody.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Second question. The main on my street has been replaced with a temporary 4-inch. My house is nearing completion. Will there be water testing done once the backflow has been moved from our old main to the new one?
Well, that's a great question. I'll answer that. So what we're doing for new construction, once we go from the temporary water to permanent backflow, we're giving you a brand new backflow. So you're going to have all new infrastructure at your place at that time. So there shouldn't be any need for additional testing because it'll all be brand new. We have a question down here.
I just want to know what the status is on the FEMA grant that you applied for to replace all the meters on the bridge.
So to replace all the meters, we're feeling very confident that that'll be paid for through the FEMA. What we're proving out is that it's more expensive actually to go through and test all of them than it is just to replace them all. And so right now we feel very confident that all of the meters will be replaced through the FEMA grant. The one thing I want to reiterate is that the backflows are not part of that. And so because they weren't in place before the fire. So because the meters were there, the boxes were there, the automatic metering system was there, those are all very easily replaced through FEMA. We are arguing to FEMA that hazard mitigation grants should be given to us because it is a mitigating factor against the depressurization into the future. So that's what we're arguing, but we haven't got an answer on that. So PID right now is having the customer pay for it. But I can guarantee you, if FEMA pays for that, we will refund all of the customers their portion of that grant.
Yeah, cooling. I was in talking about you today with some of the girls at the apartment. My problem is, I've had 2 tests done by Gina from UC Higgs, San Francisco, or wherever
Yep,
she's from.
Gina.
Both of them have come out great. It came out a few months ago and did their test. I never heard anything back. My problem is I have 3 buildings sitting there, 10 to rebuild. I'm involved with state and federal housing. They want to have a letter saying this is good so we can start building.
Okay, so you have 3 locations that are all destroyed lots, and you're looking
There's
for,
buildings on the same lot.
okay, 3 buildings on the same lot, okay. And you need the letter of portability to begin work?
Yeah.
Okay, can you,
testing it. I guess you have about 100 of those left, right? And 10 weeks to completion. So that means that you're going to be doing about 10 a week or 2 a day. How many employees do you have working on testing? It seems inordinately lengthy.
So a good question about the pace of what we do. So we have 7 full-time staff that are out preparing and sampling, and it's very likely we'll be done preparing and sampled your spot before then. But then there's the process that we're very careful about it going to the lab, that it's tracked correctly, that when the results come back that we verified them, and we work very hard to try to beat the deadline that we've promised everybody. We may get done sooner, but I don't want to make false promises in case something comes up. So we have dedicated staff that are working very hard. We end up prepping about 50 sites a week. But then there's also the process after that we want to be very careful that we followed all of our protocols and the results are accurate, because the last thing we want to do is lift the water quality advisory at your residence and then find out a mistake and have to rescind that. So we're trying to be very methodical about the way we go through that.
Well, I acquired the property on the anniversary of the fire, and it was a while before I moved into it, and had the opportunity to stagnate the water and have it tested. And it certainly looks pretty good, but I guess you guys got to do your own way, huh?
Well, what we wanted to do is protect the entire community and work our way through town. And so another twist to that too is that it's not only your service lateral, but it's the main that serves your service lateral. So making sure that all of those are in compliance. And some of those smaller diameter dead-end mains, we are finding that there's contamination in there, at which point we want to replace that pipe. So again, we're trying to work through town methodically, because your health and confidence is paramount to us. And so we're working our way through town, and we understand there was the first person that got their letter, and there will be the last person. And we wish the last person could have gotten it sooner, but we really want to be careful about how we go through this process, because PID's product is one of the few things that you ingest every single day once you get that advisory lifted. So we want to be very careful about that we arrive at that point accurately.
And my last question is, are you showing preferential attention to rebuilds of standing homes? Because it sounds like that.
So, well, that's a very good question. They're kind of 2 separate programs, and talk about that for standing homes, Back in the beginning of May, when it became clear what was occurring in the PI district about that the reservoirs were in good shape, the treatment plant was in good shape, the transmission mains, the main arteries were in good shape, Kevin gave a directive. He said, there's people with standing structures here, and businesses and people that live here. Get them their water first, because they're still here. And that was a big impetus of how we started moving forward with sampling standing structures. The different program related to the service lateral replacement is supporting the rebuild effort. And so our focus has been for a long time on what we call the standing structures. There's been no preferential treatment about where we are in town. In fact, we randomly will take neighborhoods every week around town because we also want to remain vigilant to make sure contamination wasn't moving around. And by testing all throughout the district in any given week, we're also taking main samples. And we did not find any contamination moving around, but we wanted to be random to be able to do that. That is why we've had the question, you did 5 homes on my street, but there's 4 more. And it was random, we picked those 5, and we're going to come back and do the other 4, but we also wanted to go around the district. So there was no preferential treatment based on your geography or any socioeconomic. We were also careful to mix businesses with residential because the community comes back when we have both. So we wanted to do both of those concurrently.
Okay, thank you.
Can you comment on the status of the Magalia Dam?
Yes. We have a contract out for a engineering firm to come in to do a damage inspection on the Magalia Dam. We have done internal inspections of it, and it appears that it's in good shape from what we can see from fire-related damage. But we're having a specific dam engineer coming in to look at fire-related damage as he's doing our annual dam inspection at the same time, so kind of grouping them together. We do have a hazard mitigation grant application in to look at the Magalia Dam, to look at a high hazard study for the Magalia Dam from an earthquake and from flood, and to also, based on the results of that, to look at replacing the Magalia Dam. And so we are looking at maybe the potential of replacing Magalia Dam into the near future with a brand new dam. And to move the dam, our thought is to either repair it where in place based on an assessment, or move it a little bit upstream and to get the road off of that, and then be able to give us adequate storage there at Magalia Dam. So we are in the process of looking at Magalia Dam for a replacement project through these hazard mitigation funds.
I have a general question, and I was wondering if there's on your website, if there's a map that shows areas that are been approved, cleaned, and so that the public can look and see the progress that's being made. I haven't looked at your website, maybe you have it, but I just asked them a question.
So we have 3 maps on the website, and they're really good maps. We have a map with all the testing that's gone on in the district with the results of each one of those tests. We have a separate map that has all of the addresses that have been, the water quality advisory has been lifted. And we also have a map showing all of the mains that have been lifted also. So there's 3 maps on there, very good, interactive. You can click on the address. It'll tell you all of when it was, when the test results were done, what was found in those test results. Very, very good. So PIDwater.com/recovery.
Also, if you come to the customer service office, we can walk you through it too. So there's our resource as well.
First, I want to thank you for continuing to do these community updates. I think it's important, and even though the crowds are dwindling, everybody that's here is here because they want to hear what you have to say to us about our water. And it is our water, and we do care about it.
I also think that the issue about the dam is significant because we can solve several problems. If we were to build another dam behind the existing one and have 2 4-lane roadways, 2 going into Magalia and 2 lanes coming out of Magalia for evacuation safety, for the amount of water we could store, the rehab of the dam, and then plumb every drop of water into the fire hydrants so that when all of the water lines in our burning down houses were spewing water, we wouldn't run out of water in the hydrants. I was here on this property when that hydrant out there went dry and we couldn't fill up CAL FIRE trucks. So I think I know what I'm talking about. It's not the first time it's happened. But my question really is about the cost of the backflow devices. And part of that is the town has approved people with property ownership and RVs to use their RVs temporarily for housing. And many of them simply have a hose from the hose bib nearest their heater to their RV. Frankly, I don't think that's a problem, and I think all the water in this town is fine for drinking. Even if you do get a little hosey smell out of it, it's still good water. But many of them are also low-income or currently struggling people and don't have $500, $700, or $900, depending on what size the backflow device is. Is there any program at all, any kind of a grant, any kind of a refund, any way to get a discount on the cost of the backflow device? That would really be helpful to a lot of people, I think. And more people would be signing up earlier if they knew they weren't getting hit right away with, $570 or something. Thank you.
Yeah, so we are looking into that. So right now, currently, there is no discount for that. But we are looking into additional funds that maybe are available through some other grant programs out there. It's called CBDGR funds. Those are funds that come in through FEMA to help with the rebuilding of an area hit by disaster. We'll be putting in for some grant funds for that area also. We'll talk to the North Valley Community Foundation for that. But there also, I think there is outside programs that have helped low-income individuals with their backflow devices. I don't know which ones they are, but I have heard that others, individual property owners, have been able to get some help through some other agencies out there to get that.
Look, a couple of things. One, in answer to you, have them also check with their insurance company because it's possible their insurance company can reimburse them for that cost. It's a new requirement. So do that. And then for you, Kevin, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm on the board, but I'm trying to respond to a question on mine. So there's all over, if you've seen Nextdoor.com, all kinds of comments going on, and one of the grievances is this person just got their bill for $87.94, doubling my bill. But what I would like you to do, if you wouldn't mind, is explain what the billing process is,
Sure.
And why these people's bill probably went to this price.
Correct. Okay, I can handle that. So once you receive a letter of potability, your next billing cycle, you will be back to the active rate. So before the fire, we had 2 rates. We had the active rate, which was $41 and some change, and then we had the sealed rate, which was half that. After the fire, what we did was we put everybody on the sealed rate. And we've held that until we felt the water was potable for those individuals, which means the water now is to be used in a regular fashion. There's no more restriction on the water. So therefore, you will be put back to that active rate. If you don't want to be put back on that active rate, then what we are going to do is you go back to the sealed rate, which is the $21 a month. And remember, we now bill every other month. So when you get your bill, it's $42. And then if you're on the active rate, it's going to be $84 and some change. And we're not billing for any quantity charges at that time. But if you want to go back to the sealed rate and you do not want water on your property, you can request to be put back on the sealed rate. What's going to happen is we're going to actually come and turn your water off at the property line. So you won't have any availability to water on your property. That's how it's been handled in the past. That's our policies and procedures going forward. And so the one thing is, though, is when you get that letter, it does specify in there that you will then be put back to the active rate. So we've had some customers come in and say, tell me there wasn't any notice. There is notice. It is on that letter when you receive it in the mail that you will be put back on the active rate, which is that $42 a month, 80 for every other month. Okay, well, I appreciate you guys coming out. Thank you very much, and we will be having at least one more community meeting coming up in March. We're hoping that at that community meeting we will be giving the final update on the standing structures and on the testing results of those standing structures, and declare victory on the contamination within the standing structures. So thank you very much. Have a good night.